Kia ora, buenas tardes, boa tarde, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see so many of you here for our first Latin America Cape webinar for 2022. My name is Matthew Omar, and as director of this Cape, I'll be leading today's event on New Zealand perceptions of Latin America. Here in New Zealand, it's a Friday afternoon, so it's our duty to keep you entertained as well as informed. So please stand by for a really fast-paced and hopefully fun event over the next hour. Before we move through the different phases of the event, I have 3 pieces of information to pass on. First, if you've got questions, please express them through the chat function. Second, we will be recording the webinar and making it available to you as soon as we can next week. And thirdly, please have your mobile phones ready for around halfway through the session when we do a participant exercise. I'll give you the instructions then, but please just be ready to have them on hand at the right time. So, a little bit of background, because some of the people on this call will be brand new to the Cape, so I'll be really brief about this, but the Centres of Asia Pacific Excellence, for those of you who don't know before, were created in 2017. And this is what we're going through today, by the way. I should have given you a bit of an indication. We'll be giving an introduction to the Capes, doing some scene setting, which I'll tell you about shortly, presenting the survey results. We have that participant activity I mentioned, showing some business videos, panel discussion, and then just a preview of activities. So, as I said, quite a lot to get through, but hopefully in a really enjoyable way for you all. So, as I was going to say, who are we? The Latin America Cape is one of 3 centres of Asia Pacific excellence that were created in 2017 to help New Zealanders engage more successfully with the Asia Pacific region, including Latin America. The Capes are a consortium of 4 of New Zealand's leading universities, the ones mentioned here in the slide. Our Cape is based at Te Herenga Waka Victoria University of Wellington. Together, we're a hub of intercultural expertise to prepare New Zealanders to succeed in 3 parts of the Asia Pacific region: North Asia, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. Some of the things we do together. In other words, they're about the Asia Pacific, they're joint initiatives of all the Capes, and others are specific to our region. So let's talk about our region. We do so in a variety of ways through programs, resources, and initiatives. And an important thing to note is that we develop the Asia Pacific knowledge of businesses, policymakers, and the education sector. And it's all with this ambition to enhance New Zealand's commercial, educational, and cultural relationships with these regions. Well, very soon you'll be hearing what ordinary Kiwis and experts think about our region, Latin America. And we really appreciate you being here on this seminar to be part of it and to hear what people have to say. But let's set the scene by actually hearing first from one of New Zealand's most influential commentators on international economics and businesses to see where he thinks Latin America can be part of New Zealand's re-engagement with the world as we move to reopen our borders. Brad Olsen is a principal economist and director of Infometrics and a leading economic commentator across New Zealand. In 2021, he was a panelist at the NZTE's flagship Standing Up Right Here conference and was named Young Wellingtonian of the Year. He is very focused on the economic effects of COVID-19 and the reimagination of the New Zealand economy. Brad, thank you very much for agreeing to speak at this event. We look forward to hearing what you have to say and to your setting the scene for us.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and kia ora and good afternoon, everyone. I think New Zealand finds itself in an incredibly interesting and increasingly uncertain space as well as the global picture continues to shift. Now, that remark was true before yesterday, but is even truer after yesterday's events. And I think it is important to acknowledge New Zealand's position moving forward. Throughout the pandemic, our global interactions have been critical to New Zealand's successes. We recognise that sitting down here at the bottom of the South Pacific is physically isolating, but we remain incredibly wedded and ingrained in the global international system. Increasingly, though, New Zealand does need to reconsider its position and broaden its horizons when it comes to its global cooperation. Increasingly, we are finding ourselves set in our old ways, in my mind, sticking too close to the comfort zone of those who are already strongly engaged with and missing huge opportunities going forward. And I think today's poll results and the discussion later on will highlight those opportunities even greater. Trade is obviously not the be-all and end-all of global cooperation, but it is certainly an important economic element. What we know throughout the COVID-19 pandemic is that New Zealand has been looking to continue that export and import cooperation we've had globally. In fact, for New Zealand's regions, we've seen that export market has been critical to our economic success. Commodity prices on the whole are high. New Zealand is able to not only feed the world, but continue in that strong leadership position we've always occupied. But in recent years, we have also seen ourselves focus quite clearly on enhancing our trade and cooperation most closely with those that we already operate with. Trade agreements and similar have been key with the likes of China, increasingly looking at the likes of Europe, the UK, and into especially North America. We haven't, though, looked, in my mind, far enough afield as we start to realise that we do need that diversification. We do need a broader set of friends in the global atmosphere. And increasingly, as we start to see something like one trading partner dominate an entire third of our export trade, it is time to look at those opportunities further afield. We know, importantly, as the globe changes, the people of the globe and their preferences, what money they have, but also what they want done with their money changes. Importantly for New Zealand as well in the 2022 context is we're seeing borders reopening. We're seeing that reconnection with the world, and New Zealand is looking forward not only to welcoming others from overseas onto our shores, but also sending our people back out to interact in that global sphere. And I think particularly for Latin America, we see that importance rising with some incredible opportunities, but a real untapped potential for new interactions, both when it comes to trade, importantly when it comes to people, both international students and visitors, but also New Zealand's on the ground cultural interactions as well. We're increasingly diversifying the focus that New Zealanders have when it comes to pop culture and media, and it is time, I think, to expand those focuses even further. The big challenge, I think, as we go forward is we've seen throughout the COVID-19 pandemic how quickly the globe and the economy is changing around us. The way that we do things is completely different now, only 2 and a bit years on. We're increasingly using the internet. We're increasingly seeing a greater focus on e-commerce, and the technology sector provides opportunities that we've never really had before. All of those are important in the context of reconnecting and establishing much stronger relationships, both technologically but also in person, in my mind, with Latin America, because of that activity that is coming forward. The focus in the tech sector across the region is huge, and often something that New Zealand forgets about. And I think from my point of view, the fact that we're having this discussion today really reinforces the importance of looking out broader for New Zealand, really to stretch its wings, to think in a different way about the partnerships that we hold globally. This is not about kicking out old friends and bringing in new ones. It is making sure our friend group is as large and diverse as possible so that we do have those differing interactions, so that we do have a variety of opportunities, both for ourselves but also the partners that we hold closest. in my mind, and in closing, I think there are huge upside potentials. There are huge opportunities for New Zealand to strengthen its connection in Latin America, from those core economic elements of trade and similar, through to the people that we interact with, that we send over, and that we welcome here to New Zealand, and increasingly as well in the way that we operate, the culture and the technology that we use to interact, and taking some of those great ideas and the fast innovation we're seeing coming out of Latin America, bringing that into New Zealand, because as a small island nation, as a small part of the world, we don't have the might in of ourselves to go forward, but with partners, with a greater number of friends, we have huge opportunities to uncover. Thank you very much, Matthew. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Brad. Those are really interesting remarks, and I'd love to get straight into them today, but I might save that for our panelists right at the end, leave a little something at the end. But your point about huge upside potential is, I think, borne out by the results we're about to share. So without further ado, I better start sharing those results, which will be the first part of this webinar. Joining me, as I do, will be a polling expert. It's my great pleasure and privilege to work with David Talbot, one of the founders and directors of the company who did the research for us, Talbot Mills. If you don't know them, they're one of New Zealand's most prestigious polling companies and specialists in corporate and political research. As well as working with many of New Zealand's leading decision makers and corporates, David actually manages the research program of Prime Minister Ardern. And in a minute, he's going to talk about the methodology behind our results. But before he does, what I'd like to do is just briefly say that these are not the first results that we've done, that the questions are largely the same for the 3 years we've done them, that we poll the public and business, and you can find the previous results on the Latin America Cape website, and you'll soon, next week, find today's results as well. Why do we poll? For a couple of reasons. We're a relatively new organisation, and so we're looking for hard data, empirical evidence on which to base, adjust, or change our work program. Secondly, those of us who've been working in the Latin America space for a long time hear a lot of things about Latin America's place or lack of place in New Zealanders' minds. We want to test that with numbers. So David, can you tell us a little bit about the numbers and how you've helped us do these surveys?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Matthew. As Matthew said, this is the third time that we've helped run this survey. The latest one ran mid-November to mid-December 2021. Over half of the results you're going to see today are based on a representative online survey of 1,000 members of the general public aged 18 years and over. As usual, the sample was weighted to age, gender, region, ethnicity, to make sure it's really robust and representative. And online surveys are increasingly robust, usually now far more so than the traditional phone surveys that we would have conducted some years ago. But in this survey, we also wanted to make sure that the voices of business decision makers were included as well. So we wanted to talk to people who are involved in importing, exporting, or investing in countries outside of New Zealand. To make sure that they were included, we oversampled these people to take their number up to nearly 300 overall. And that allows really robust analysis in comparison to the general public sentiment in the first half of the survey. So what you're going to be seeing reported on up next is two halves, if you like, to the survey. The first, a general public sample. The second, a business sample, business decision makers with those connections to trade, import and export.
Thank you, David. You can all just check you can all hear me okay there. That's great. That's very helpful. So David will be here later on to chip in some comments around some of the results we're going to be presenting, but he'll also be here to answer any questions you may have, being an expert sampler. So we're going to present results in three broad sections: COVID-19 and recovery, public results and business results. The first section includes both public and business. We're starting with COVID because we think it's the elephant in the room, because it has severely disrupted trade with Latin America, but as you'll see, not totally. So let's then look at these COVID recovery slides. These are the public responses. You'll see that roughly a quarter of the public respondents see Latin America as part of New Zealand's future. It's really important that we look at these results here. In other words, it has an important role to play in New Zealand's recovery. And while that may not seem like a huge number, we'll soon be able to explain it. What is important is that the businesses we sampled had a much stronger sense that Latin America, they knew about Latin America, and that even though they had suffered some impacts on their business from COVID, nevertheless, they were very keen on engaging with the region. Here are some of the impacts that I talked about. As you can see, these are 2 years of polls from 2020 and 2021. COVID, of course, only being relevant for those 2 years. Interesting story here is that if you look between 2020 and 2021, it's the impact on New Zealand businesses which is growing in terms of as a barrier to business, rather than COVID's impact on Latin American businesses. Now, significantly, we have a couple of mixed figures here on the right. And I should say to you all that don't worry if you don't capture all these figures as we speak. We're going to make this presentation available afterwards. So we're just presenting the highlights of them. And next week, we're going to be putting the full results on our website so you can study them at leisure. But it's important to note here, hopefully you'll see that there have been barriers to business, but business remains interested in Latin America despite COVID's challenges. Indeed, last year we found that businesses, 7 out of 10 businesses, 71%, a bigger number than last year, felt Latin America had an important role to play in New Zealand's recovery. And as for what those roles could be, here were the responses from business respondents. So, in short, if we were to review these slides, the business respondents were much more likely than the public respondents to see Latin America as having a role in New Zealand's recovery from COVID. David, do you?
Yeah, thank you. Just very briefly, I think you're absolutely right to flag that businesses obviously do feel that Latin America has an important role to play in New Zealand's recovery, and it's in a way no surprise that they think that to a larger extent than the general public, who are often just a little bit less informed, a little bit less connected to those kinds of issues. But again, as you said, I thought the really striking thing here was the rise to that figure, throughout the course of 2020 and 2021, such that even business respondents had risen 14% in terms of the extent to which they felt that Latin America was going to be more important. So, I think that's a fabulous result.
Let's then turn to the wider results. We didn't just ask them about COVID. We effectively asked the public and the business the same set of questions, but with a couple of extra questions for the business community, who are the main focus of this poll. So we're just going back here now. So here are some of our wider public responses. So we first asked Kiwis about the importance of Latin America to them. Now this is again the public poll here. And what you see here is that the numbers are relatively constant. Despite COVID, the different circumstances, the numbers are all in the mid 50s. And Similarly, you get a remarkable level of consistency about what are the strongest links. No surprise that sport is mentioned, because some New Zealanders engage mostly in Latin America through rugby ties with Argentina or other sports. When we asked them about the public, about their level of awareness of the differences between nations, again, not a tremendously high number, but certainly a consistent one. We were interested to see, drilling down a little further, how many New Zealanders could self-identify which nations in Latin America were within APEC. Now, this is one of the few cases where the numbers are quite different year on year, and it's a bit of an interesting story here, because of course in 2019, Chile hosted APEC, and in 2021, New Zealand did, albeit virtually. So perhaps it explains the varying levels of knowledge about APEC. So that was just a slightly deeper question that we asked. Now, interestingly, that we also asked them to sort of describe Latin America in a single positive word. And we put it in a word cloud, so we thought that you might enjoy seeing what that looked like. And it's pretty clear that the cultural elements come through loud and clear. And I actually, this is one of my favorite slides, because I used to be a lecturer, and students would often, I'd say, tell me the good things about Latin America. And they'd come up with a remarkably similar one. It's culture heavy. We're not showing here, but we could show, and you can see in the report, that we also asked them about negative images, and they were crime, poverty, and drugs. Now, information levels are really interesting. Again, consistent, but low. We asked New Zealanders, did they keep up to date with developments in Latin America? And what stopped them becoming more aware? And this slide shows that A, not many of them do keep up to date, and B, it's the lack of news is the main impediment. You'll note on the second slide where it shows lack of personal interactions. That was a new one we asked, and that was because of COVID's border restrictions. Quite significant results there. Interestingly, New Zealanders may lack news about Latin America, but they still look to the news to provide it. They get many of their sources from the traditional media, and to a lesser extent from social media. A couple of final ones on what the public felt about perceptions of Latin America. Really interesting that we asked them a general question about their attitudes to New Zealand students learning a second language. And they were very in favour of the second language, but that also includes Māori, Te Reo, and Mandarin and every other second language. But good news, New Zealanders want their children to learn at least one other language than their home language. Interestingly, there was support for students learning Spanish or Portuguese. And the reasons why they wanted to learn Spanish or Portuguese were the worldwide use of these languages. We also, though, asked them about the education system. Do they want to see more content in schools? And roughly half of them did every year. Now, we finally, and this slide is quite relevant to the work of the Capes here, we wanted to see what skills did our respondents think New Zealanders need to learn to get more familiar with Latin America. And the skills were closely matched our own ones. So what do we conclude from this? Well, obviously Latin America is not top of mind for most people in terms of New Zealand's COVID recovery, but the public is open to learning more about Latin America and its languages. And given the lack of other information, our focus on raising awareness of the region is essential. And as you saw in the last slide, our priorities match public preferences. David, would you be able to comment further? Do you have anything else to add there?
Just very quickly, I think you've covered that fantastically. But I think, what's fascinating and exciting for me is the fact that these results, I think, really point to the huge opportunities that exist to raise the profile of the region. I think there's a lot of stretch that's possible, given not just where people are starting from, but the extent to which they say they're interested. A very strong starting position in terms of both positive sentiment on culture and language, which I think is hugely exciting. And I think I'd expect the extent to which the public thinks that other nations are important for the economic recovery to grow over the coming months and years. And I have no doubt that these regions will be absolutely crucial to people's perceptions of what needs to happen and where the focus needs to be.
Thanks, David. Now to turn to the final set of slides. A few more of these, because this is primarily a business audience, and so we're keen to make sure that the results serve you. Really interesting thing to note is that this year's group of business respondents had a greater exposure to Latin America than previous groups, which may actually have influenced their results. We asked them if they'd visited in the last 5 years, and many of them had. So one thing to note about this business sample, it was a more engaged group. And possibly because they were more engaged, they had a much greater knowledge of the differences between Latin American nations. They had a higher knowledge of the public than the differences of which Latin American nations were in APEC. And interestingly, a lot of them knew some of the really creative trade arrangements which MFAT is driving, and in which Latin America has a partner. Now, of course, trade agreements is acronym land. We're talking about the CPTPP, Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, the Global Agreement on Trade and Gender, and the Agreement on Climate Change, Trade and Sustainability. So hopefully I got my acronyms right. And so there was some awareness of these new arrangements, again, from the business group, more than the public. Interesting though, we think these numbers are really significant among our business respondents. High knowledge of Latin America's importance to New Zealand, and the links were largely the same. The other point we want to say here is that, interestingly, and this will relate to one of the videos we're going to show you soon, when you think positively about Latin America, even the business people often emphasize the cultural aspects, and they had the same negative ones too. In terms of their information and sources, the business respondents were much more likely than the public to keep up to date about developments in Latin America, maybe because they'd been there more. And again, social media and traditional media featured pretty prominently. Again, like same sort of barriers as the public had, but we think the interesting one is the lack of prior guiding resources. The Capes are trying to help that. But when we say lack of personal interactions, what that means is the lack of interactions with Latin Americans in New Zealand. And of course, the number of Latin Americans in New Zealand has slightly declined with COVID because of the closed borders. Lack of peers means lack of peers interested in the region. Barriers to business growth. Now, this is an important one here. This kind of brings us back to where we started. COVID has had a major impact on the relationship, but there are other more systemic barriers as well. For example, the cost of travel or language barriers. Note how language appears again. But we also asked, and this starts to preview some of the themes which do come up in the videos that we're going to show or introduce. Knowledge of the local ways of doing things is really important. Enjoyment of the culture was really important. And knowledge of languages was very important. So these were some of the themes our respondents identified. Coming to the languages, like the general public, there was definite support for second language teaching in principle, and a much higher level of support for Kiwis learning Spanish or Portuguese. And some of the people that we spoke to were interested in learning Spanish themselves, or Portuguese themselves. Some already have learned it, and you'll find that if you drill into the deeper data when we make it available. Finally, we asked them the same questions about content and skills, real interest among the business respondents and schools teaching more Latin American content. And apologies for that. And main Latin American skills New Zealand need to learn. Again, language, intercultural skills, and business skills. So what do we conclude from this? Well, as I've said several times, businesses have a much higher awareness of Latin America. COVID has had its impacts. Businesses are resilient. They've said, you've seen before, that Latin America has a more important role to play. Culture matters, and their education matters too. Sorry, excuse me. So, David, any thoughts from you? Final thoughts from you?
Just very, very briefly, really. I do a lot of work in the messaging and communication space, and there's a very consistent trend across all of the areas I work in that kind of space, which are definitely showing up here as well. And that's the move towards social media and social as a communications method. Certainly, my advice would be not to neglect traditional channels, but to kind of be aware and to keep an eye on that trend. You know, people are going to be finding out more about this part of the world through those means, and a very strong presence and a very deliberate approach to the communications that you put through social, I think will be really key to getting the lift that you deserve, you know, out of this kind of current environment.
Thank you, David, and thank you once again for everything you've done here. We've really enjoyed our relationship with you, and David has agreed to stay on at the end in case any of you ask a thorny methodological question, which I'm completely not equipped to answer. You've now all heard the poll results here, and so now we're going to give you the chance to react immediately to them. So this is where we talk about the participant activities. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask you to grab your phones and to set up the little exercise that we're going to be doing now. Okay, can you see at the top there the screen which says go to www.menti.com? I think that people can. If you go there, I'd like you to use the code, and you should be able to get these questions coming up for you. The code is, sorry, the screen share is actually 3875 5934 menti.com. And I can see that we're into it now. And if you've got your phones and you've managed to get into those, you will see this question: what were the most surprising set of results for you? And as you can see, you can go along and press from 1 to 5 whether a result was not surprising to you or very surprising to you. So we're now going to start the clock and give you a minute . Okay, I've been asked to repeat the code, 3875 5934. Oh, you're underway. That's fantastic. Great. So the most surprising set of results for you. So we'll give another 38 seconds. Hopefully people are getting into it now. Okay, interesting results coming through here. This is the voice of the public. You've got 23 people who have voted so far. If more of you can vote, that'd be great. We've got 27 people who have voted so far. Numbers are steadily rising. Okay, so it's clear so far with about 12 seconds to go and 36 people voting that the importance of Latin America for businesses is the most surprising level of information. Okay, going once, Closed. Okay, let's go to our next. So go clear winner for that one. Next set of questions. What were the most important set of results for you? I'm not going to read them out to you now. We'll just start the clock. Okay, is anyone voting so far? Yeah, here we go. There we go. "13 people have voted so far. Our numbers are rising now, 18. Okay, just 14 seconds ago, 40 voters. So this is good numbers. Pretty even here, pretty even set of results. And closing now at 42 votes. So narrow victory for awareness of Latin America and information sources. Our last question for you now is this. Now, there's no numbers to think. You just have to type in a word here. If you had to summarise New Zealand perceptions of Latin America, what word would you now use? Keyword is now after you've heard these results. Can we start the clock? Here we go. Might see Ricky Martin here. Okay, good to see Ricky. In case you're not familiar with word clouds like these, the more people who respond, the stronger a word appears. This is our final question. Look forward to result. We've got 38 voters. We could draw it to a close, I think, if numbers. I think we're pretty solid at 38 votes. So can we draw it to a close now? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Let's stop it now so we can get on to the rest of the show. So really interesting results there. And so we look forward to seeing what the panelists have to make of them. But before we do, let us now move to show you some videos. You've heard a lot of words. Now you're going to hear from someone other than me. So let's do that right now.
What's it like doing business in Latin America? We asked Kiwi businesses who've been there.
Working in Latin America is a lot of fun, and they really love Kiwis.
Being in Latin America is just as much about business in the evening over a steak as it is in the office. Being with them, their families and their friends is very important to them. You need to take the time to do that.
Being a New Zealand brand is helpful in LATAM. It's great for working with retail partners. They're very engaged and love working with New Zealand businesses.
They're very similar to us in New Zealand.
So what do we have in common?
They're pretty laid back, easygoing, and they like to enjoy themselves.
They love sport, they love red meat, they love dancing, good times. There's a lot of Kiwi elements to who they are.
They're fun, they're a good laugh. They're always challenging you with their ideas and their learnings. And once you get to know them, they're extremely loyal.
And what do they think of us here in New Zealand?
Actually, we're surprised at how much they know about New Zealand.
In Latin America, New Zealand is very well recognized mainly by 2 things. Number 1 is the level of innovation, and number 2, the excellent way that the COVID was managed.
Safe, trustworthy, innovative, modern and green.
And they're always asking, what would New Zealand do in this case to solve this problem?
I think they see us as a bit of a beacon.
A great cultural fit then. Anything else?
I think something that the Latams really appreciate in Kiwis is the ability to be authentic. So turn up with your fishing stories and photos on your phone. That really adds to the fun of the moment.
Latin Americans are fascinating and thriving with culture and just, great people.
Is it risky doing business in Latin America? We asked Kiwi businesses who have been there.
Latam's an interesting place to work in, and you have to have a long game. It's all about a relationship, and you have to really prove yourself as wanting to be in that market for some time.
And they're protective of their industries, so just got to be careful and make sure you're aware of all the challenges.
So what are some of those challenges?
One of the main challenges that we've faced when dealing with customers in Latin America is to identify the decision maker. And the way we overcome this challenge is by building relationships with local partners that can be our eyes in that region and help us identify these people.
Is having people on the ground important?
Having people on the ground is super important.
They are your eyes and ears and can really kind of help out with the small nuances of the market that you don't really get to understand until you're over there.
Often at a meeting or meeting with customers, it's what's not said rather than what is said, and you can only understand that if you're local, you know the culture and you know the people and the language.
Especially considering that their decision-making process might take longer than other regions.
Do things actually take longer?
Working in Latam, you have to have different expectations about the timing of things.
Manada is not a myth.
Just things in general take a lot longer and they kind of move at their pace and not your pace.
You're not exactly hitting roadblocks. You're sort of hitting chicanes in the road where you can find ways around.
It doesn't mean they don't like you or like the product. Don't get despondent. You just have to keep working, relationships will build, and the work will come.
To summarise then, when doing business in Latin America,
It's important to remember that good things take time.
Have a long-term view, be prepared for delays.
Make sure that you have a Spanish-speaking person in your staff if you want to be successful in Latin America.
Understand your potential customers, understand the potential size of the market, and understand your selling strategy.
If you've got empathy and you've got time and patience and commitment as well to see it through, then you'll get there.
It is worth it once you're there.
Just a little bit of word about those videos there. They're effectively a second tranche of videos after the success of a first tranche we did last year with NZTE and the company Mini Minds, who made both of them. And the first tranche was so successful, you can see them on the NZTE webpage, bursting with Latin America, bursting with opportunities. We've done these new ones partly so we could show some new material from the rich interviews which were done, and partly because we wanted to present thematic, just to focus on themes. The first set of videos focused on companies, so this was a way to delve deeper into the nuances. Speaking of delving deeper into the nuances, here we have now 3 panelists. So to sort of wrap it all together here, and to first talk about the videos you've just seen, then tie it back to the poll results as well, and also to Brad's opening remarks. Those of you who've been to a CAPE event will know we typically, or Latin America CAPE event, will know we typically like to have someone from 3 worlds on our panel. It's really important to have someone in the region and who's respected by business and government official, and we couldn't have anyone better than Rhianon Berry, who's Trade Commissioner to Mexico, formerly Trade Commissioner to Chile, been in the region for 15 years. We also really work closely with the Latin American New Zealand Business Council, our strategic partner, and today we're lucky to have their executive officer and a former director, Giuliana Silveira, who's a Brazilian who's been in New Zealand for almost as long as Rhianon's been in Latin America, and I won't say how long for either of them, but it's been a wee while. And lastly, the CAPEs are about the transfer of academic knowledge. And so we always have an academic in our panel as well. In this case, an academic has been of enormous help to us in so many contexts, Dr Antje Fiedler from the University of Auckland's Business School. So they cover those worlds, and now I'm going to ask them to cover a few questions. Sorry, excuse me. The first question actually goes to Rhianon, and it picks up on the fact that these are a second set of documentaries. So what I'd like to do is ask Rhianon, in what ways do these new videos flesh out the story we began telling last year through individual profiles? What insights do they show you which should strike you as particularly important? And how do they resonate with your own experience on the ground in helping Kiwi exporters break into Latin American markets?
Well, thank you, Matthew and Kate, for the invitation today. This has been an extremely successful collaborative project between CAPE and NZTE, and I'm really proud of this partnership. Seeing our customers come to life in their stories and these videos is just fantastic. The videos are so interesting just because they show a myriad of growth perspectives and opportunities in Latin America. And across a range of industries that they come from. And I just love the way that CAPE has put these through different themes. NZTE has worked really hand in hand with these companies to identify growth opportunities across all the different Latin American markets that they operate. And through different challenges, from understanding taxation to developing different business partnerships. And in many cases, a lot of that's been remote through the challenge of COVID, which, to tie to the poll is something that some of those companies have had to navigate. And some of those comments that come through in the video, those companies have launched products during the COVID period. Through to supporting companies to have localized marketing, which I think is another thing that David was talking about around, digital and marketing and localization and I think really important themes coming through there from those insights on those videos. One thing that really resonated for me as well through the company stories is that we can I think it really shows a Latin America that's a region full of talent, a young generation that's digitally engaged, innovative and vibrant tech sector. I think comments like that are amazing, and we totally agree at NZTE. We've always said these kinds of things, and it's just amazing to hear our companies, tell these stories and share these messages for others to learn from. I think that those are some of the things that I'd like to share.
That was wonderful. Sorry, coming through okay? Just showed me as muted for a second. Apologies. Thank you, Rhianon. Those are fantastic insights. We too are really grateful for the collaboration and acknowledge the work by many minds in producing these documentaries too. Antje, follow-up question for you. These aren't the first resources we've created for businesses. You've been involved in a past one, namely New Zealand Inc. case studies of successful companies, and you're about to be involved in our next one, the Diversifying into Latin America program we're going to offer exporters next month. Do you see common messages between these video resources and the prior resources that you've been involved in and the future ones you're developing?
Thank you, Matthew. Yes, I do think there is a very good fit between New Zealand and Latin America and what consumers look out there. So in our workshops, we would normally explore trends that are happening. And of course, COVID is a big theme now. So I just want to share maybe 2 trends that we are observing and discuss in depth in our workshops that are also linked to the videos. That is first frugal innovation and sustainability. So I think because Latin America has, as all economies impacted by COVID, there's a real need now to carry out frugal innovation to mitigate the negative impact of the COVID pandemic. And in Latin America, there has been a negative drop in GDP. So we now have to think about selectively improving our products and service offerings in a way to increase the value for customers in areas that are most needed, but also keeping them affordable. So I believe for New Zealand companies, there is a very huge opportunity because, as you know, innovation is in our DNA. And in our workshops, we give some tools for New Zealand firms how to carry out such frugal innovation for the Latin America market. And the second one that I just want to highlight is sustainability. And we could hear in the video that sustainability and the New Zealand image is very well received. And as you perhaps know, because of COVID, there has been really negative impact in terms of waste. And what many maybe don't really realize, a very recent survey of the Euromonitor showed that the consumers in Latin America are actually more concerned about climate change compared to the consumers in Europe, in the Asia-Pacific region and in North America. So I believe New Zealand companies really can leverage the nice green and clean image that we do have. But to do so, it's really important to also adjust the business model and the product offerings. For example, if you want to be perceived as authentic, it's important to maybe have small changes in the packaging that really demonstrate your commitment to sustainability and reducing waste. So these are things we are in a way bringing to life in our workshops, and we think it really helps to better compete in Latin America. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Antje. We'll talk a little bit more about the program at the end. Giuliana, as a former director of the LANZBC and a current executive officer, how do you think these videos could be useful for the council?
Thank you. First of all, great to be here today with our strategic partner on this webinar. The videos produced by CAPE and NZTE are just wonderful resources, really. They highlight the cultural fit between New Zealand and Latin America. But what I really like, particularly in the second video, is how it addresses, but at the same time kind of demystifies the potential risks of doing business in the region. We'll definitely be promoting these videos within the council's kind of membership and a wider business audience to continue to disseminate the knowledge of the region. But it was interesting that looking back at the poll, one of the results in the poll indicated the lack of resources, lack of prior knowledge, lack of news are all barriers to increasing awareness to Latin America. So I think by promoting these resources and kind of coordinating the agencies to kind of share good practice and highlight a positive narrative of Latin America, which is what we saw on these videos, we are all helping to remove those barriers. So great to have these resources now there. Thank you.
Thank you, Giuliana. We're going to be actually rolling out the resources through various social media channels on our website over the next month. So there are going to be ones on different themes. And I really loved your point about demystifying the risk, because yes, there is risk, but yes, it needs to be demystified. How will these videos, do you think, impact upon your own work as individuals or your organizations? And how do you think the videos and the poll results should impact upon the work that our CAPE needs to do? So really that's such a big part. I framed that question wrong originally. How do the poll results and the videos, how should they impact upon the work that we all do?
If we start talking about the council from a business perspective, I must say that I was quite pleasantly surprised and encouraged by the business community. I think it was 85% respondents who think Latin America is important to New Zealand. So there is a lot of work in the trade and commerce space within the council for us to engage with this community. However, I must say that I was wondering how this number translates to businesses actually pursuing opportunities in Latin America in terms of putting Latin America in their budget, doing due diligence, and liaising with government agencies like NZTE, for example, or if they just said Latin America is important, but let's see when we are actually going to do something about Latin America. As for the CAPE, I think one of the goals for the CAPE, it is to deepen New Zealanders' knowledge and understanding of Latin's culture and languages. And I think it showed that there is a bit of work to be done in this area, in particular with the general public. It's still quite low, the percentage of people who have indicated that they will likely to develop their Latin American knowledge in the next 5 years. And I think this is where international education and tourism come in and are so important. We need the young Kiwis to join the working holiday schemes, go to Latin America, do their OEs there, learn the language, experience the culture, and come back as Latin America ambassadors. That exchange program is really important. So it's great for CAPE to continue to work on that space.
Thank you, Giuliana. Rhianon, over to you. We're actually beginning to run out of time here. I do apologise, but Over to you, Rhianon, and then Antje for a quick response.
Just a quick comment that, for me, there were a few things around the intercultural skills that I think are really important for us to all be thinking about. And I think Antje making her comment about localization is something that we work quite a lot on with companies, how to localize what they're wanting to do to the Latin American context is really important. But I think about businesses, we've been working very focused as NZTE on a couple of initiatives, and I'd just like to highlight one in resources and energy space. It's the Koda Program. We started that with just 3 companies that we were targeting to work with. We started that in May 2020. Right in the middle of a pandemic. We've been working with 11 companies in a very focused way to help them understand the market opportunities. And they've been able to validate those market opportunities and are now very focused on working in Latin America to realize that potential. And I could see those words coming through in the word cloud, growth, potential, opportunity. And I'd just like to leave that idea with everybody. I think that that's what Latin America represents.
Thank you very much, Rhianon. Antje.
I will keep it very quick. I think for me what was striking was that opportunity in Latin America and the optimism for New Zealand firms and also the wider public. But then if you looked at the main barrier, it was really the lack of news. And I think we have kind of almost like a calling now to bring that knowledge about Latin America closer to the wider community and the New Zealand businesses. So I think it's quite exciting.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that. I do actually have to apologise to all 3 of you. We've run out of time to ask you more questions. I want to go into this in more detail, but if people do have, we'll go about 5 minutes over time here. If people are able to stay on, I just want to give Antje, and Giuliana and Rhianon an opportunity if they wish to make any final comments.
Maybe I can just say thank you so much for organizing that really interesting session. And it was really lovely to hear from others about their interpretation of the videos. And to all the people who joined us today, I really hope to stay in touch and maybe we can keep the discussion about Latin American opportunities for New Zealand businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Antje. I would probably leave it there because I do want to spend the last couple of minutes actually talking about promoting 1 or 2 other things, one of which you're involved in. Firstly, Antje and a few others in the Latin America team and another academic, Tania Jurado at Massey, will be presenting this new formal workshop program to you. Actually, enrolment's closed today, but if anyone's on this call and is hearing about this initiative for the first time, we can extend the opportunity for you to actually enroll until Wednesday. So do contact us. The difference between this and say today's event is it's a formal program run over 8 weeks. Secondly, we have other initiatives focused heavily on business. For Pacific and Māori businesses, we have a Latin America Business Reconnect program. And again, like the dealer program, the Diversifying into Latin America one, it closes today, but will extend the opportunity for people to apply until Wednesday. We've got a few other business seminars lined up. Some of them are going to be run on behalf of all 3 Capes, North Asia, Southeast Asia, and ourselves in Latin America, and some will be offered purely by our Cape. And so all of these are going to happen at various times throughout the year. And we'll tell you about those at appropriate times. Last point is that we have other initiatives too related to, which may be of interest to the business audience in particular, aimed at different components of it. We're already over time, so I don't have time to really go into those today, but I look forward to sharing them with you over the course of the year. Look, everyone, it's been a really fast, almost flawless hour in terms of the text. So apologies for the 1 or 2 glitches, but it was quite an ambitious exercise we put on. I really want to thank all our speakers, beginning with Brad for those scene-setting remarks, David for explaining some of the ways we've done the polling and how we've done them, and our 3 panelists at the end, Rhianon, Giuliana and Antje, for offering 2 brief comments on it. This is, again, not the last time we'll be engaging with you this year. This is being recorded. We'll make this webinar available to people. We'll put the poll results out soon. For now, I just, on behalf of my colleagues, to everyone who's put this on, and the LATAM Cape team and the Cape Consortium, it's been wonderful to have you with us. We really appreciate your interest in what we do. We always look forward to your feedback, and we look forward to sharing the results with you. So thank you very much. Until the next time. Good afternoon.